You are the reason I still love Beirut.
Monsters to leave us.
I could go down a very long list, but I won't because I'll embarrass myself and you.
Is really a shame. What progress have you seen? Makes my heart ache, really. I can do good things to the city. I have a clean, clear history. My love to the city has never changed. So this is something that we lost totally. لتكون لهم حياة وتكون حياة أفضل. When downtown was, when Solidaire was a reality.
You are the reason I podcast. You are the reason I still love Beirut.
Wow.
You're the reason I have a building that I can go to regularly when I'm a bit reflective and there's no one to talk to. You're the reason I respect urban planners. You're the reason I have high admiration for civil society, not today, but 30 years ago. You're the inspiration for saving buildings. You're the most colorful civil society activist I know.
Ronnie.
And I could go down a very long list, but I won't because I'll embarrass myself and you. You were the third guest I had on my podcast, a recording that could have taken place 5 years ago, released afterwards, when we were both looking over AUB campus. This is pre-October 17. We were talking about a city we both love, a city that we call home. And that hour and a half conversation, it still lives with me. I still listen to that episode. So for all those reasons and many more, Mona El Hallak, welcome to MTV Podcast.
Ronnie, Chatah. Thank you for this amazing introduction. I don't know if I deserve that, but thank you. You know, when you said 30 years ago, it is 30 years ago. Yani, it's been 30 years we're doing what we're doing. We still believe in what we're doing. We're still here. We want to hang on to this city, to this country. And we want it to be the country we want, the country we deserve, the country we belong to, the country that is there. We just want all these, monsters to leave us and
Those
let us
monsters are the reasons why you and I are tired, are stressed. Sometimes we're not 100% mentally available, but we're still here and trying. And those monsters, I think, are what brought us both to love the city more. Now, let me try, and you feel free to interrupt me if I'm going in any direction that's uncomfortable. I found a way to criticize Solidaire thanks to someone like you, without being an extremist, without being fully on board or fully against. I found nuance, because I know that you were on the streets. I know that you came back to Beirut. I know that you saw a city changing in a way that was permanent, and you found a way to have a rational argument against erasure. You're the reason why I have lexicon when it comes to collective memory. Collective memory is not a joke. Collective memory is, I think, the only reason we love Beirut. And without that memory, there's nothing to hold on to. You're also the reason why I, after the port blast, never felt that I was overdoing anything. I was never doing enough, because I know the kind of commitment you made post-blast to fix the city you love. Without you, I think a pillar in this city's story would be missing. And that's why I'm never doubtful. I know that you're going to be here until your last seconds on this planet, which gives me great comfort. With your permission, I want to start from the port blast and go back in time. And the reason I want to start with the port blast is not necessarily the blast itself. It's a film that I watched several weeks ago, and last week's guest, George Azar, is the filmmaker, the director of Women Hold Up Half the Sky, and you're one of the 5 women honed in on. By accident, I got to discover a third cousin of mine is one of those 5 women as well. She's a third cousin, and she introduced herself as a relative, and I wouldn't have known that had she not said anything. But before she even approached that topic, watching her passion was so infectious, And the way she was there celebrating a city she loves, it reminded me of you and the way you love Beirut and this country. That story, the way the movie delivers the journey of women in post-blast recovery, I think it's safe to say that without civil society, the port blast devastation would have been 10 times worse, if not more.
100%.
So let's go there. Do you think that, for better or worse, civil society plays the role of the state, at least on the most basic level? City recovery, infrastructure restoration. Do you think that is civil society today?
I mean, imagine if civil society didn't step in after the port blast. Every time I walk, even now when I'm driving, I just was driving and I saw one building on the port side that still now is being restored by Ofrejwa. And I was like, oh my God, we really, how could such a huge magnitude of destruction be remedied so fast? 2 years is nothing in that span, but without the state, without any intervention from the state, with only civils. We even collected the rubble of the explosion. Yani, not only on the reconstruction level, not only on the people, not only on bringing back people's sanity, but also on the environmental level, also on levels that we shouldn't be even thinking about.
Yeah.
Why should we care about where the rubble of the destruction goes? Because otherwise it would have been in all our mountains somewhere.
Yeah.
But at the same level, at the same time, the people were completely helpless, and we still have that ability to come together in the face of severe hardships. And that, the way the diaspora reacted, how could we still be living in a country that doesn't respond and listen to us?
Mm-hmm.
We are doing this after the blast, going to Mar Mikhael and listening to how some of the people were still in their shock, in their aftershock, and they had some of the investors coming to tell them, let's get your heritage buildings out of your hands. How could you
knock them down
not
and build
how
something
how
else,
could you not react to the blast? What it really did, it destroyed our last best protected heritage cluster in the city.
Yeah.
We have 4 heritage clusters around Solidaire after the destruction of downtown, and Mar Mikhael and Ashrafiyeh were the 2 best protected clusters that we lost in a few seconds. And yet the investors and the real estate speculators found it a place to come in. And that is what made me furious the first day, because it was a story I heard the second day, and I'm like, we cannot let them take over because the cluster is destroyed. And that's how people came together and people started working.
So I'm going to ask you a two-folded question, and it's the only section that I'll dabble with politics. The first part is not political. It's more your own perspective. Post-blast, Jemezi, Mar Mikhael, and the areas above, the hill above, Ashrafiyeh, did that bring you back, maybe unconsciously, to the way you saw downtown as the war was ending? Did you see a part of Beirut that you thought could actually end up being erased?
Exactly.
Like Martyrs Square, maybe not to the degree of Martyrs Square, but more like there's a neighborhood or there's a section that could simply go to real estate catastrophe.
I saw the greed, Ronnie. I saw the greed because it hasn't been, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, there were started mushrooming towers in Mar Mikhael and Jemezi. And we ran to say, please, this is our only intact heritage cluster. Other heritage clusters like, for example, Za'al-Blat, Antari, Ain al-Mraisi have completely, we lost them completely. We have a very few examples of urban tissue that still preserves our identity. While in Jemezi and Mar Mikhael, the streets are still intact, and it's not only the buildings, it's the people, it's the what happens on the ground floor of those buildings, the relationship of the buildings to the street, the greenery of the city, the typical greenery of the city. You can still see the small urban gardens. So this whole thing was so beautifully preserved, and thankfully, except for a few exceptions. And when they started, we ran and we stopped them for 2 years. You know, Gemmayzi was put for 2 years under study, and 10 of the towers were halted for a while.
Yes, right.
And so, so the greed, everybody was eyeing this place before the explosion, and suddenly the explosion made way. Okay, now the buildings are destroyed, and you know, now I'm part of the Minister of Culture has consultants who give him their opinion or some advice about the demolition of old buildings.
Which is new, right? In general,
it's actually started with Minister Salim Werde, and it's still going on.
Okay.
So we are now receiving still cases of buildings that were damaged in Gemmayzi and Mar Mikhael. Say the buildings are damaged, we cannot rescue them anymore.
Yeah.
But for us, we have to rebuild them, because the tissue cannot take any infiltration of, you know, these horrible, beautiful modern buildings, but in the wrong setting completely, in the wrong context completely. You cannot imagine in Gemmayzi Street, you know, suddenly this, you know, like what happened in Sirso, for example.
Right. That's the great example I was thinking.
So the tower in Sirso, what is that doing?
Yeah.
And it was a crazy that the defense of the architect was, we're using materials like brick and wood to make it more human. You cannot make this thing more human, and you're breaking the scale.
And that's the worst type of greed, because that's maybe it's a bit sensitive to say this, but that family greed is something that's very difficult to overcome, especially when you see certain relatives that want quick results and others that are shocked with those results. You offered a nice segue to the second part of the question. You just outlined two things: institutional memory you carry, which is, I think, why someone like you is a consultant to the Ministry of Culture. Also experience. You know neighborhoods, how they look. You know how they once looked, whether it's surrounding downtown or Sirso or anywhere. You reminded me that Antari used to be yes, it was. I remember Antari differently. Let alone Za'al Blat is unrecognizable today. But that is the story of a civil society activist trying to get hard work done. So, the only political question I'll ask you: civil society's role in politics and that institutional memory, you stink, October 17 combined, and the election results, whether it's Belediyet Beirut or Parliament. Is there anything there that's disheartening to you, that the numbers in Parliament are rather limited and the municipality, the number was 0? Do you feel a bit of, I don't really know what the word is, but that this hard work has its limits in Lebanese politics?
Definitely. I mean, it's you said it. I mean, in the municipal elections, it was, although with the euphoria of Beirut Madinati, the fact that out of really nowhere, people just came together because they love the city, and they actually made that 40% of the votes was not
That's
a
true,
joke at the same time. But at the same time, losing totally because of not having our electoral system was really a shock. And at the same time, it was a loss, because in those 6 years, Beirut could have been a better city.
Yeah.
And the money that the municipality had 6 years ago, and that was spent when the dollar was still a dollar, is really a shame.
That's a nice way to say it.
Really a shame that the city is here now, starting from the very basic issues of solid waste management, to the electricity, to the proper infrastructure and street furniture. Why do we have to have a municipality that does, where the city in 6 years, where has the city gone in 6 years? Let me say in 4 years. Let's not discuss the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Where has it gone? What progress have you seen?
The 40% figure is also good to remind anyone listening or watching that that's very close. But that's how elections work in this country, at least municipal level, that very small margin, and then no one from that entourage can say they tried in the municipality. I want to tell you, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. The phrase Beirut Medinati became more appealing to me knowing that you were involved. That's the kind of weight you carry. And I think whether or not they were able to translate that message on a national setting, forget that for a moment. It's simply the fact that there's well-intentioned citizens trying to do politics in a better way. In terms of civil society's role in politics in general, are you taking a step back from politics because you feel that there's a red line, that even 40% is still not enough, and that maybe we won't have municipal elections in the near term, and that maybe last year's parliamentary elections were not the kind of occasion to really rejoice, that they were limited at best? And we know where it is right now. Are you taking a personal step back?
Yes, I am. And it's also because of the way the divisions between, let's be very clear, the divisions between us as a civil society.
Within civil society.
Within civil society. You know, this is disheartening to me. And really, sometimes I cannot face it. And I'm like, because I sometimes do not want to believe that we can actually not be on the same wavelength, that we can actually create more than one list to run for elections, that we actually do not see that it's impossible to run without one unified list, whether it's for the municipal elections or for the parliamentary elections. The fact that we can still be divided makes my heart ache, really.
And that internal division is forcing someone that could be a unifying voice to take a step back.
Yes, because I've been thinking of the municipal elections, and I really wanted to run.
I can't think of a better mayor than you, Mona.
And
you know that. I mean, I've told you that.
I think I can do good things to the city.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can see that we're still not unified, and I cannot see that I can run with several lists running against the political, the political elite are going to get together on a list.
Yeah.
The people who never talk to each other are going to be on one list. We know it, and it's coming.
Yeah.
We can see it in all the syndicates, Order of Engineers on Sunday 15. You will see people who do not agree on the political level will agree on a list so that they can keep their powerful positions.
And civil society will stay divided on the other side. And
I mean, when are we going to get together? If not after, what else could bring us more together?
Yeah.
Why do we get on a humanitarian level? Why do we always become one? And then when it becomes a matter of power, then we still have that. We don't agree.
I don't want to overstep here. It's the last thing I'll ask you on political terms. Could you ever imagine your role transcending civil society with the usual suspects? In other words, a list that is including you, but other people you're not comfortable with.
At all. That's why.
That's not on the table.
The no compromise is the first thing that I will. I always, with the few meetings that I had, I said, I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
I have a clean, clear history.
Yeah.
My love to the city has never changed. I never compromised for anything, and I do not have to get there. I'm trying. If I get there with my full beliefs, I'm there. If not, it's okay, because I will not get, if I'm there, not with people who would compromise, then I will have to compromise.
That's exactly why I know that you've stuck to your principle to the point that you'd rather be frustrated and not in the municipal elections, or for that matter, frustrated not in politics, but keeping your independence and your beliefs intact as a civil society activist.
And try to do what I can do from where I am. At least I'll be proud of what I'm doing. I will never, for 1 second, feel ashamed or feel that uncomfortable with the decision that I have to take or that I have to go by because I compromised.
Let's go from compromise and politics and that very difficult subject, and let's go back in time. Both of us identify with one part of Beirut. Even though you love Beirut in its totality, so do I. But even before recording, we're leaning on Ras Beirut regularly. And that's not an accident. It's not that Ras Beirut is just one of many neighborhoods. It's that I think Ras Beirut, at least up until now, it symbolizes something that I assume, I've never really asked you this, I assume best identifies two people like us. Meaning, it's the last visible cosmopolitan part of this part of the world. And it shrinks over time. It doesn't expand. Maybe it used to expand, but we're too young to know when it was expanding continuously. I think in our life, it has continued to shrink slowly. Maybe that shrinking is getting a bit too small right now.
But it's still there.
It's still there. And when I say cosmopolitan, I think that word maybe is not best understood always. Cosmopolitan doesn't just mean communities living together. It's not that. It's being comfortable with being complicated and being layered in identity, where it doesn't really matter anymore what community you're from. You're from Ras Beirut, and that's that. And I think the most prominent AUB alumni turned lecturers, turned perhaps dinosaurs, they still, to me, best identify what I love about Beirut. And that's unique in that Ras Beirut also has AUB, which is an institution both of us identify with. Looking now as somebody who's in her prime, and I hope I'm in my prime as well, looking at a neighborhood that is changing in ways that are not always controllable in every way, whether it's heritage, whether it's poverty, whether it's demography, and these are sometimes these are sensitive things to talk about, but we're able to talk about them without prejudice. It is simply true. Demography, urban planning that no longer is planned, it's just urban sprawl gone wild. Parking lots that used to, the most lovely, the most beautiful gems in this city that once defined that neighborhood are gone. I grew up next to the old lighthouse. I know that street next to the old lighthouse for the better part of 30 years, and I'm 41. Most of my life is those beautiful homes that reach the old lighthouse, not these disgusting towers that dwarf the lighthouse.
Unfortunately.
And I don't think of this as moving in the right direction. I think that we will live the rest of our lives holding on to remnants of Ras Beirut or cosmopolitanism. So I'd like you to tell me if you feel the same way in your heart, that you're comfortable enough knowing that no matter what we do and talk about and what we say and what we fight for, this is a change that's beyond our control. And we will live the rest of our lives trying to mitigate, but not really having a chance at changing things around permanently so that this does not continue.
The loss on the urban level and the architectural level is huge. And the first loss is in Ras Beirut is the seaside, the seafront. It's unimaginable that a city like Beirut has a seafront that completely blocks the rest of the city. That all those towers mushroomed, and along that beautiful Ain al-Mrayseh. Definitely, this is irreversible. And also, as I drove today, I just passed by the Citadel, the latest horror that's on the seafront, and it's empty. It's empty.
At night, there's one light on,
it's empty, and it's the scale of that tower is so overwhelming, and so it symbolizes the greed, and it symbolizes the real estate power. And the power that's not in our hands, unfortunately. The lack of urban planning, the lack of any sense of urban planning in the city. So this is something that we lost totally. That's why, but I'm not sure if I'm nostalgic. Is it nostalgia? Because I still, for example, in my work, I still think of the fishermen. I still think of the ports of Beirut, of the ports of Ras Beirut. And I still think that these are little gems that we should, look after, take care, these little things that still remind us of the Ras Beirut that we love. And when you really if you sit with a fisherman from Ras Beirut, it's like, it's totally, you're living in a different era. You're living, the genuine Ras Beirut time. You go up, you walk in Hamra in the little streets. I know that Hamra has changed its face, but at the same time, it has recreated itself. a space like Barzakh, for example, that's now, bringing back that kind of cultural life to Ras Beirut. Masrah al-Madina, I would support that place with all my efforts. These are places that still hold on to the cultural
Masrah
aspect.
Medina is closed, right?
No, Metro al-Madina.
Sorry, Metro is closed.
And it's not closed, just removed to another Ras Beirut
You're right.
location.
I'm sorry, yes,
to a bigger
yes.
Ras Beirut.
Yeah.
The Masrah al-Madina is the Nidal Ash'ar's space. These are places in Ras Beirut that we hang on to and we say, yes, it is still there. But the diversity of the people is still there. Of course, it is. Many people are now in the, because of the overwhelming demographic change, we've received a lot of refugees into Ras Beirut. Ras Beirut has opened its arms once again to people. And
that's actually a nice way of identifying this part of Beirut too.
Because I think that they found refuge in this place because they will not be equally tolerated, let's say, if not say welcomed somewhere else. But at the same time, the people are still, there. You walk in the streets, you see the people of Ras Beirut, the little workshops that still exist, the remaining few architectural gems that are still there. We lost a lot, but it's still there. So do we fight for it? Do we give up? But the cosmopolitanism is still there.
I want to
because
challenge
of the
you.
American University of Beirut.
Yeah, okay, so it's a nice, you're making this so much easier because it's like our minds are lining up naturally. I agree, AUB is the reason why you can never remove it completely. Your role in AUB too. I'm going to try to link what you said to what you do as well. So these are three names. Nidal Al-Ash'ar, Mansour, I forgot his last name. The
Mansour
part owner,
Aziz.
Part owner at least of Barzakh and Mizyan. And I identify those places with him, really, and yourself, the AUB Initiative. So there's three people doing their own role and trying to keep Ras Beirut the way we understand Ras Beirut. These are either small business enterprises, the arts, or in your story, really, it's almost like a creative way of reminding us of what Ras Beirut is. We were talking before recording even chess sets on Jeanne d'Arc. Maybe they're not there right now, but at least there was an effort to pedestrianize sections of Jeanne d'Arc, these sidewalks, these benches, these lovely sounds from the sea that fizzle their way up through these lovely pipes. I believe they're still there.
They are.
And the stairwell that goes from AUB down to Ain Mreisi, that's my childhood. And every interview I've watched with you where you're in your moment and in your element, you're standing there or sitting there on the steps talking. I believe even in the film, Women Hold Up Half the Sky, there's a section where you're there. It's like, oh yeah, that's Mona. I know where Mona is exactly, and that's where she is all the time in my mind. That's just three people. And that's the better part of Hamra, which used to resemble those three things. It's not there. I'm worried that there's a permanent change, but you can challenge me if you feel otherwise, that the shopkeepers that once identified themselves as Ras Beiruti, or at least part of Hamra, they're gone. The artists or the thinkers, the intelligentsia, I don't know if they've all left Lebanon, or even for that matter, Beirut, but now I see them in Badaro. Even to the point of the AUB crowd that I once identified with at the cafes of Ras Beirut and Hamra, they're always in Badaro. And I'm beginning to feel like Badaro has, in a way, inherited something. At least, maybe the crowd we identify with, the cosmopolitan Ras Beiruti, who goes out in Badaro. And I don't know if that's a temporary thing. It feels like there's a departure that, maybe I'm being too blunt here, feels like it's permanent.
I have to say that the younger generation definitely doesn't see Hamra the way we see it, because they haven't seen it the way we've lived it, and they cannot see that it can come back. Going to seek somewhere else like Badaro or Mar Mikhail at night is definitely happening, and I can see that like Hamra has always changed. You know, it was never the same, and I still hope that this is going to be reversible at some point. But we all feel when walking in Hamra that it's not the Hamra that we know or the Hamra that we love. And there's a lot that has a depressing kind of, it's heavy on your heart when you see all these, scenes of people, deprived people. And that brings you, you don't want to see them. If you want to go out, you want to go out to a place where you think you want to get that happy hour or happy, feeling.
Or even feel comfortable walking in your surroundings
without being
overburdened.
Overburdened with those, sights of definitely people who are in deep deprivation.
So this is a very
personal. And they have taken over Hamra.
I'm sorry to make it very personal, but in your experience, in your own life, do you still go out much anymore in Hamra? Other than Barzakh, which I go to as well. And I think Mizyan on occasion.
Mizyan, Marbuta.
You still go?
These are the places. Barzakh, Masrah al-Madina, Metro when it was around. These are but also Rasif.
Yes.
There are places which will never. I still go around the coffee shops around AUB, Cafe Yunus. It's a gem in Commodore. The one that was started by Tawlat al-Hamra, and then it became Cafe Yunus.
The big Cafe Yunus,
This is like a place to when you're there, you are in Ras Beirut, right?
That's true. You're reminding me of the places that I always let go of when I think of Hamra. You're right. That is Hamra too.
Yes, of course.
But in terms of your,
even at the end of Bliss Street, what was the Indian restaurant at some point?
Now it's an Indian restaurant again. It's back.
But there are little these places that still for us bring that Ras Beirut back. But in my work at the AUB Neighborhood Initiative, what we try to do is to try to re-enliven public space and to give the city a bit back of its charm as a public space. The streets, the staircases, as you said. So we take them and we just implement interventions in them that make the people feel more, let's say, tempted to use them, more tempted to sit, if there's no bench on the sidewalk. Of course, we as Lebanese, we bring the chair out and the argile sometimes and the backgammon table, and we do that. But if there is a backgammon table on the street and there are two benches that you can sit, you will use it easier, more readily. It's more ready to be a city that is used as a place that is used as a public space. A stairs on its own is fine, but a stairs with a kind of a megaphone that actually makes you listen to the sound of the sea will make that stairs a more special one, a place that belongs to its place, to its context. We lack public space in Beirut. We lack, now we are working, for example, with Ahla Fawda, an NGO that really is an amazing NGO, and they have also Art of Change. They are responsible for all the murals that.
Which some of them are quite striking. They're beautiful.
Hamra. It really made Hamra an outdoor exhibition space.
That's true.
When you're working, we worked with them, for example, to beautify. Facing the main gate, there was this the abandoned shops. So we collaborated with them, with Ghalib Hawila, who came, and we did the motto of AUB: لتكون لهم حياة وتكون حياة أفضل. That they may have life and have it more abundantly. That is something that we strive to do in our everyday life.
But you just, I don't know if you carry this with you, but you just made sense to me about something I was always confused about. The younger generation, like you said, doesn't identify with Hamra, but AUB is the younger generation, and whether they identify or not, AUB and Ras Beirut, there will always be that synergy. So you kind of, in a way, you're pointing to the most important thing, which is if AUB shuts down, which there was tentative fear that something like that could happen, with the crisis that unfolded, that to me was the
It can, I mean, it can, first, it can never happen because the AUB is the American University of Beirut, and that's where it started, and that's where it will always be.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, the rumors that went around with the crisis, with opening in Paphos, were just really rumors, because AUB will never give up its campus.
Oh, you mean like shutting down Ras Beirut, moving entirely to Dubai or Paphos? Yeah.
That would never be the
Although
case.
Paphos is opening in what, September, the
Yes,
campus?
yes, right
that
now.
to me still sounds, it's just so bizarre. But I guess that's part of our reality, that there's going to be an expansion of AUB. But
Yeah.
AUB shutting down, no offense to LAU, AUB shuts down, Ras Beirut shuts down.
Yeah, I mean, AUB and Ras Beirut are definitely born, they feed into each other. They made each other. But at the same, I was telling you, like with Ahla Fawda, we're taking a lot on above Hamra Street, and we're turning it into the eco hub of Ras Beirut. A model, what we actually do is we create models for a better urban living, and we hope that the municipality can take that model and scale it up and take it to other places. So, for example, when we made Jeanne d'Arc Street a pedestrian-friendly street, it was just to show the municipality that we can, with very little, it's not about money, it's about what you do. When you rehabilitate a street, you can, with the same money, make it a more pedestrian-friendly, humanized street. So instead of giving the car the full freedom of having a car park on the right and the left, just by removing that car park, expanding the sidewalk, giving people a wider sidewalk, which means a place for them to sit, trees, things to happen on that sidewalk, then you make it a more pedestrian-friendly street. And if every area of Beirut has one pedestrian-friendly street, it makes life a better place. It makes the city a better place.
You find, you remind me something when I talk to you, the way you outline a story, and it's just your own story, if you will, but it's the story of Beirut that's linked to it. You remind me of the way I used to try to give history tours in Beirut. Nothing is chronological. That's the most boring way to describe it. It's all sort of, it's like that's why I called my podcast the Beirut Banyan. I used to start my tour underneath the banyan trees of AUB, and I always thought every story could be like a root growing into the earth, and then chapters that branch out. You're, in a way, going back and forth my whole life when you talk. And I'm going to try to link all of this to something very important. AUB Neighborhood Initiative, your own passion for the city, preservation, collective memory, reflection, and Beit Beirut, or the Barakat building, where sometimes there's even overlap. AUB Neighborhood Initiative takes important part, in the Alu Beirut exhibit that I actually went to at the inauguration of the exhibit, and I saw you there as well. I even did my own episode with the curator and an NGO member that took part in that, and I think of the only reason we have something like that, really, at the end of the day, is your perseverance. No one should ever forget that you are heavily involved in giving us a space to do this. And my fondest memories are watching you talking to people in the Barakat building about the building. But it's like, without you, this whole thing wouldn't happen, and it requires you to be there. Once you were very generous, you even suggested that I try doing what you do in that building. There's no way I could ever do that. It's yours, and you're very good at it. I want to get into the story as much as I can of reflection and what you thought Beit Beirut would become, and maybe what both of us couldn't imagine, which is it's not just reflecting on a bad chapter of Beirut. It's not just the civil war. We're in 2023, and you just reminded me of many tragedies, and the port blast where we started, inconceivable that could happen in 2023. That's 33 years after the civil war. Now there's more damage, there's more suffering, there's more pain. And Beit Beirut, its civil war importance maybe over time, that unfortunately becomes one of many bad chapters. So I see repetition. I don't see closure. And I think Beit Beirut maybe is that story too by accident. It's one of repetition. It's not one of looking back and trying to learn. It's one of living through the present as well.
Beit Beirut was never intended to be, people think that it was intended to be a museum of the war. For me, it has always been a museum of the memory of the city before the war, because it embodies the city before the war with all its avant-garde architecture, its beautiful cohabitation, the people that lived in it, the stories that of the people that lived there that are still coming up with time, every time we dig more into it. It is the war because it is the Green Line. It is the division. It is a machine, a war machine that was used and abused actually. And you know that the architecture was made so that this building is connected to the city through this beautiful void, dividing void. And what destiny for a building that's designed with a void in the middle to actually be on the dividing line that divides the city for 15 years, and to be used, the transparency that was created with love to the city, to be used to actually disrupt life in the city.
Those sniper holes and everything.
And because in this, it is sniper holes existed everywhere, but in this building, they were sniper visual axes that were actually created to link the building to the city, that became sniper holes. And then, for me, what is more important is how important this building in showing and embodying the life in the city after the war. For it to take 20 years to convince people to leave this building and not destroy it, the fight to save your heritage against real estate speculation and erasure of memory is embodied in the fight of this for this building. I mean, in 1997, when I started that campaign, there was no WhatsApp, there was no online petition.
There's no hashtag, nothing like that.
There's nothing. There was, you know what? Siberia had just opened their internet providers, and I went to Aboudi.
This morning, I was trying to remember the name.
It was
Siberian IDM, right?
Siberia specifically. I went to the owner and I said, please, I just want any exposure. And he gave me this little tab that said, save our city's heritage. When you click on it, it has a photo of the building and says, this is an important building of 1924 that is threatened by demolition. If you would like to know more, meet me at Beit Beirut on Sunday. And that was it. That was for years. For years. So, but the thing is, this building for me, you know, when downtown was, when Solidaire was a reality, you know, when I saw that there was no more, khalas, it's there, destruction was there was no Martyrs Square, nothing. That day, specific day, in September 1994, when I went down to Martyrs Square after I was 1 year in Italy, I hadn't seen the destruction. I had heard of it. I had been sent some photos by mail because there was no social media.
This is 93, around 92?
I left 93, I came back 94.
Okay,
so September 94,
literally the months
literally it was the time when everything was flattened, when there was no Martyrs Square. Even the Martyrs statue had been taken for restoration. So there was, when I went down, there was nothing to remind you except the Opera building. From the Opera building to Pole, there was a flat surface and the sea. That was totally surreal.
I want to plug this in, surreal. Just not to age you, but the fact that you call it the Opera building, Cinema Opera, I don't think anyone from my generation knows that Virgin Megastore, but the younger generation doesn't know that it's Virgin. Or they're going to forget soon.
Yeah, because it wasn't. It was also they shut down. So that day is the day when I discovered the Barakat building, and what I think is, for me, it was kind of, I want to hang on to what is left, but it had so many layers that made it for me the battle, because it was not only a beautiful building architecturally, it was not only a beautifully sited building urban-wise. It's urban. The place, the way it occupies that corner is amazing. It commands the city from that corner. it's not only the way it was used and abused during the war. It's not only the architectural significance of its architect, Yusuf Bek Aftimos and Fuad Quzah. It's everything together in one building.
Yeah.
And we can still lose it just because we want to build another Sodeko Square tower.
May I ask you, Mona? Several weeks ago, I did a live episode with Zavan Koyumjian, who told me that it's on one of his shows in 97 or 98 where he had you and the owners of the building on a panel. Is that true?
Yes, of course.
And that's the most exposure then for this cause, that it went from Siberia to suddenly it's a television panel discussion.
I really went everywhere.
You went everywhere, yeah.
Ronnie, my mission was I have to talk about this building.
Yeah.
And if it goes down, because nobody believed that this building would stay, because the whole city was destroyed. The whole city was erased. And you're Mona talking about one building. But for me, I thought if it has to go with a fight, and it has to go with dignity. It cannot just go. And that was when on that show, the owner would tell me, this is dangerous for public safety. Leave this building alone. And I'm like, it's not dangerous for public safety. And when, they went to the Majlis Shura, it wasn't, they went back and forth. This building went back and forth in court.
Yeah.
And every time they win, and I'm like, I raise the voice again, because they are winning with reasons that are not true. And this is how we lost most of our heritage buildings, by the way.
This is why I mentioned family at the beginning. You're fighting the owners that want to make quick money. I think that's really the stories that they never had, and they never will have enough incentives. And that's not your responsibility. That's the state to actually offer them a way so that the money that they're trying to make, they can still make it in other ways. It may take longer. It may be less visible, but their assets are more valued with the original structure. That seems to be the biggest nightmare.
Ronnie,
families are eager to make money.
The problem is I am always in the middle, right? I don't know sometimes I don't know how to deal with it, because really, after all, these people own these buildings.
Yeah.
Some of them, in the case of the Barakat building, I was a bit relieved because they are a well-off family. But in other cases, when you know that these people do not have enough money, they have inherited, they have enough, many children and grandchildren, that they do not have enough money to send them to proper university, for example, but they are sitting in a $9 million house.
Yeah.
How do you reason with these people? Tell them, no, you have to keep this building because it's heritage.
And it's not even your job. That should be a neutral voice saying that kind of value can be given elsewhere. I know stories of other cities where the same situation happens, a lovely, beautiful gem in the middle of a city square, an old town square. The family is given property outside the city, and that's the compensation. They can build whatever they want. They could even make more money.
It's a very complex situation.
Yeah.
And there is
There's
law.
endless ways to do it.
There's a law for the preservation of heritage in Lebanon, because today there's no law.
Right.
There's a draft law that has been going back and forth since 1997. Since 1997, we started working on it. In 2007, it passed to the parliament with Tariq Mitri and stayed there, slept there. In 2017, it passed again after revision to the parliament with Minister Ronnie and it slept there. And now maybe in 2027 because it has been, funnily enough, an interval of 10 years. But it's not a priority. It's not a priority.
Such a disaster.
And unfortunately, by the time that law is on the table, really, we might have lost most of our heritage, right?
So let me take the conversation to the last section, which I wanted to explore with you. You just offered me a time frame which I didn't realize. You're looking at 30 years of a draft law, from 97 to 2026, 27, where that draft law may get enacted. That's twice as long as the Civil War. If you include the Civil War, that's half a century. So half a century, that's our lifespan. We'll be dead.
But that's the case for every single cause you fight for in Lebanon,
exactly.
Ronnie.
100%. So let's say, and we kind of went back and forth about Zaven, which is also important. He even writes books about this predicament. One of the books I really enjoy is Lebanon Shot Twice.
Right.
And a more recent one, Beirut Guilty Pleasures, which is almost like It's a tongue-in-cheek book about celebrating the war and the paralysis and owning it. But both books, they describe a situation where the people that are best capable of dissecting the problem are only dissecting the problem, and when they try to make serious change happen, they're met with huge obstacles, and it's the wall that both of us, I think, if you just have an episode about the problem, it'll last years, I think. A recording where, imagine going back in time and talking about every single stumbling block you've faced. Now, looking at it long term, I don't see the city changing for the better in a very important way. I see the things that we held on to after the war ended, and even the controversial things that happened after the war, I see them fading too. And let me circle this properly. If there's one person that could best explain how something like Solidaire happened, it's you. Not the radical version of it, or not the cutthroat capitalist version of it either. It's somebody that sees a city losing its heritage and wants to save it. And you're not an extremist when you talk about Solidaire.
And it's social fabric. That's the most important part.
Social fabric, and I vaguely remember the early years of Solidaire, not the later ones, where pressure from civil society contributed to having these discussions at least, and the community engagement that happened briefly. I think credit goes to someone like you, trying to see a project underway that's too difficult to shut down, but trying to make it work better. Solidaire today, even Solidaire is unrecognizable. You know, even the restored parts of Solidaire, the few restored zones, including Nijme, can't get in. All those archaeological sites that were uncovered and preserved, some of them removed, but the ones that were preserved, they're walled off. Security. Neighborhoods that completely changed, but they're not necessarily ugly. It's just that they're clones, like Wadi Abu Jmir. Can't walk in. And then you have the other part of Solidaire, the waterfront, the land reclamation, Zaytuna Bay, which, whatever you want to say about Zaytuna Bay, but even what should have been a park and the corniche that was meant to be finished, the waterfront corniche. Look at it today. You know, I walk there frequently. One day I'm going to injure myself getting there. It's a risk you'll sprain your ankle getting to a concrete disaster.
Ronnie, there's no accountability.
But I'll give you the last words. I can see a situation, and I'm sorry to make it a bit personal here, but where the Holiday Inn, something that I used to love talking about on my tour, stays like it is right now for the rest of my life. I imagine michel-el-murr staying an abandoned tower. I imagine St. George looking the same damn way it looks right now. And the waterfront marina, that area, looking exactly the way it looks right now for the rest of my life. And I see that more and more, and I'm beginning to not care as much. I used to actually look at the Holiday Inn. Every time I would do my tour, for 15 years, I would look at that building, thinking that this may be the last time I look at it because it'll be brought down. Now I'm guaranteed that I don't have to look at it anymore. It's going to stay there. And maybe the question is, sorry, it's a long roundabout thing to end it with. Can you offer a way in your life, in your experience, where you still see room to prevent that from happening? Whether it's through politics, whether it's through pressure, whether it's through perhaps economic recovery later, that we're going to have to play a role in preservation. I mean, I want to see a way that I can live the rest of my life knowing that this is not all we can do.
It's a difficult question or a difficult situation, Ronnie, because really change will only happen if first people care. Because if you say, I'm starting not to get, actually, this is what I'm afraid of. People not caring anymore. Because for them, they just want to live normally, live a normal life. So for them, bigger causes are starting to lose importance. Even now, when we are starting to try to lobby for the municipal elections, people just like dismiss, like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And if it's happened, nothing will. If it happens, nothing will change. This loss of hope is the most dangerous thing we are facing right now. People not caring is the most dangerous thing we are becoming. The people who care and who are still fighting are becoming a bit less.
Yeah.
Some of the new generation, we are trying to instill this in the new generation. They want change, but at the same time, if they have a chance to leave, they are willing to leave. And that's also, we are not going to leave. We took our decision, we are here. But what will happen if everybody who wants to leave really leaves? In AUB Beirut, there's an installation by Yeva Adweihi. It's a kind of our homage to the diaspora about people who left in the past 3 years. And a lot of people are the people we never thought would leave.
Yeah.
So the past few years there have been so many disappointments and so many, major negative events that really, even us who never thought about leaving, the thought crossed our minds. Sometimes when the thought crossed my mind, my husband is Danish and my son is Danish. I cannot give my son his Lebanese nationality, right? So my son is not actually Lebanese.
Yeah.
So I really thought, am I giving him the best choice being here? Because I want to fight for my city. And the fact that this thought crossed my mind terrified me.
Yeah.
Like, Mona, if you are even thinking about the possibility of leaving, it's impossible, it's kind of out of the question. So we really have to hang on, because even when you leave, please ask everybody who's living abroad, who is happy? They are comfortable.
That's true.
But they're not happy. And everybody says, if Lebanon, stabilizes, we will come back.
That's
we
true.
want to retire. When we retire, we'll come back to Lebanon. It's crazy that this country, with all its problems, still offers a place where you feel at home, where you actually feel, when you walk down the street, it's your street, it's your people, it's your language, it's your accent, it's your sunshine, it's your sea. There is something in this country. The 10,000 square kilometers are too tiny to have all these contradictions, and yet they are beautiful contradictions, because they make you, they make you feel alive all the time. And when you go outside Beirut to any of those beautiful, beautiful villages and natural sites that God has given us, would you find this anywhere else in that small piece of territory? No. When you ask anybody about when they are abroad, why this country is not a place that can be forgotten. It lives with you. You want to come back to it. We are living here. Let's make the best of it. Let's give people hope that this will change. It's not easy now. It's getting more difficult. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would have been saying this with much more, force, with much more presence. Now I'm saying it, but I know that it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
But let me ask you one more question, and you'll have the last word. This happened recently where I was talking to a friend about her own decision to do exactly what you just said. She couldn't rationalize a reason for her to stick around. She saw financial opportunity, she took it, and she described her position exactly the way you said. She's comfortable with her life, and she's in Europe. She's at ease, but she's not happy. And she would come back if she had the incentive to do so. I told her something, and I want you to expand whatever you can. I told her, I'm comfortable knowing that my wiggle room is severely constrained. And I'm selfish in that I know whatever it is that I try to do makes me feel better, but it may not have. any direct consequence beyond my own limited space. Short, maybe symbolic moments will happen. Some positive will be sprinkled on the negative. But I think I'm comfortable and happy knowing that I do what I can, but the story may not have anything to do with it. Going back to a tragedy like the Civil War, and you look up at the sky and you see these relics, I'm now okay knowing that that's the skyline, and I will die with that skyline. And I don't know if that's a bit of a, it's not fatalism, it's more that maybe that's the only way to be sane today. Because you and me and the people we both love that are still here, we're under severe stress and severe pressure. And I think that's part of the reason why we hold on to the city more. It's that when you leave Mona, I know you won't, but if you did, that would be such a...
It cannot happen.
It cannot happen. But I also, with all due respect, I don't see what we both want to happen
Happening in our lifetime.
Yeah. So whatever you can say to that.
I agree that I also think that what we are seeing in the, I mean, I'm 55, so to be honest, in 15 years, what can change? You know,
Yeah.
knowing that in 30 years of really standing up and fighting for so many causes, what did we change? We bought time. We bought time. We bought time for Dahlia. It's not a resort yet. We bought time for Beit Beirut. It's not destroyed. We bought time for many of the heritage buildings in Beirut. We bought time for a few of the causes we believe in the city. But what does it mean to leave? It means that you want to be in a place where you have a better life, right? Is a better life for me is to be happier and less comfortable than to be more comfortable and less happy. I was in Qatar now for a TED talk, and I went down, and I can get an offer, a very luxurious, lucrative offer in Qatar. I went down, I walked in the streets. I don't want to be there. It doesn't mean anything for me to be there. Of course, people are there to make money. And people are there to contribute to the development of another city, whether it's Qatar, whether it's Dubai, whether it's Europe, wherever they are. But deep inside, what do you want? What makes you happy? What makes me happy is to open my window, look at Asr Jumblat, smell the gardenia, hear the birds in the morning, know that I can go down, stroll next to the Corniche, still see the sea is still there. They will not take that from me. Walk in the small streets, see the genuine people that really love, smell the food that we really love, eat the manouche from that little shop, and feel that this is the Beirut that I want to grow older in. And I hope my son will not leave it. But at the same time, I hope the city will give us an opportunity to continue living at a certain standard that we do not want to go below, right?
Let me go insanely romantic here. The last stretch of his life, Robert Fisk, a man that lived in Ras Beirut for almost half a century, a controversial man. Maybe he wasn't always in tune with where the public was, and maybe he took decisions in his editorial line that maybe did not reflect where the region was. But there's a time where that man invested his career and his life in Beirut, in Lebanon, and he lived in Ras Beirut. One of the last stretches of his life,
Loved it.
And he loved Beirut, maybe a little too much. And Beirut, I don't know if it loved him always, but the last time I saw him, this is towards the end of his life, he was walking on the Corniche, older, rather tired in the way, his mannerism, his body language was almost defeatist. But he recognized me. And I always remember this. I saw him in Einem Reisi. He was walking towards downtown, and I could see the skyline behind me. That skyline has changed so much in my lifetime. The skyline is going to change again. May not be better, may be worse. Robert Fisk walking towards the green line, and then the seashore next to him, which is permanent. Those rocks that are millions of years old. You can maybe bulldoze a few to make some cheap, short-term beach that nobody respects. It's just rocks that were thrown on these millions of year-old rocks that deserve better treatment. But for the most part, those rocks are not going anywhere. And the sea is going to be there for the rest of our lives. I wrote an obituary to him. I called it Skyline and Shore. And it's really the balancing act between a city that's always changing. It'll keep changing well past our lifetime. But a shoreline that's permanent. And I think maybe that's the name of this episode, Skyline and Shore. So Mona, thank you for joining MTV Podcast. You're really one of my favorite guests, but more than guests, you're a pillar to me in the city story, and you're one of the voices and people I admire most.
So don't give up and don't say I don't care anymore, because you have to care, because this is our city and we're going to stay here and make it a better place as much as we can during our lifetime. Thank you.
Mona El Hallak, thank you.